Alright everyone, welcome to Syntax tutorial, and we're gonna help you understand what our job is supposed to be for. So you get tracking artist as a job. Well, what do you do in tracking? Well, we're gonna basically recreate the camera motion that was, shot. So by doing this through calculations in Parallax from the computer, we're gonna be able to remake that happen. So you can read this if you want. I'm not gonna read it to you, so you can pause the video and then read this about 20 times to understand it. But I feel like seeing this is much easier to comprehend. So here is a shot without much parallax, if at all any, and it's a lock off. So there's no real, way to measure this unless you're just putting planes and stuff and then trying to make a layout. So that's cool, you're making perspective happen and all that. But don't get confused with the actual water bottle moving too much as opposed to this other one over here. So we're going to see that the water bottle is going in front of many objects very quickly as opposed to the things in the background. And that's basically what we're trying to measure. We're going to try to tell the computer, hey, this is in the foreground, this is in the background. Help me recreate the scene. So we're gonna see how we see this in Synthesize. So I'm gonna pause this real quick because we don't need this anymore. And we're gonna go to Synthesize for this. So a small little exercise, we have this shot. So how is the camera moving? How we're gonna recreate this motion we see in a 2D plane? How we're gonna get this to even be done? Well, don't worry about it. We're gonna try to envision how the camera is moving. So we're going left and a bit upwards and around this character in the middle. So this is the foreground, basically, midground, and the background is like the walls. And we're gonna basically make points in Synthesize to tell the computer, hey, this is the direction that the camera will move based on the parallax you're gonna solve for. So to kind of get a better understanding, like you see the play and obviously the motion, but how is Synthesize gonna be able to see this? So I'm gonna just do a real quick thing here to show you how Synthesize is even seeing things. Sadly, Synthesize is like someone who is blind and cannot see. You have to kind of tell it and guide it. So we're basically there as trackers to do this. So when recreating the motion, you're going to try to evaluate, okay, how is the shot moving and how am I going to optimally put points for foreground, middle ground, background to achieve parallax. So this is how Synthesize views the world. This is how it's trying to process how things look. And it's kind of difficult without seeing the plate, you're going to try to see these markers and then envision how it's moving based on the motion. So you have these blue trackers here as the foreground, as opposed to the background moving quickly like that. So by this motion, you can see that we're going around the character, and it's hard, it's difficult to try to kind of go here and envision it without 3D. So this is what it's actually doing with the mesh. Let me hide this guy real quick. We're going to see now with the trackers we have, we're going to recreate the world. So from that 2D image you saw, we were able to process these points in 3D space, guiding Synthesize to make this happen. You can see things in the world lining up pretty well. I'm going around the character. So motioning towards it and around it. So let's do another case example. Let's do another shot here. This one's a little more straightforward. The other one's a little, engaging, but this one we can tell maybe there's something here that we can't see. So this is what Synthesize sees, and this is how it solves with the trackers. You see how my trackers are disappearing because there's probably something going in front of a person or a column or something. And when we solve these shots, Synthesize is going to kind of interpolate the motion for other trackers as well. So it's kind of like unifying everything to make this world. So I'll give you a few seconds to kind of envision how it's rotating about. Maybe it's going left, like the other shot. We're going to do some 3D here. This is how the shot turned out. So we have basically foreground, middle ground, background. You're going to see how this column is moving in front of the character. And it's kind of obvious, like maybe you already know what parallax is, but we need to get a better understanding of how we're going to recapture this, how we're going to essentially build this out. So you see here this 3D world. This is probably the staircase over here. As you see the motion, it's probably being like that. This is probably building in the background. And these trackers over here are probably going to be the floor. So you're going to have to kind of think how Synthesize is going to react to this. So if you put like a dozen trackers here but nowhere else, you can't really get this motion. You have to have these points over here to dictate, okay, here's the depth, here's the distance between these points, here's the parallax. So let's do another shot real quick, a little look and glance. So this one's a little more complicated. I'm going to give you a few seconds to try to understand what's happening here. So this motion, let's think about it real quick. Alright, enough guessing. So the motion is going to be kind of like a 360 before around the character. As you see here, the motion is rotating like this. So this is when Synthesize kind of goes berserk, and you have to realize that when you're putting all these trackers, this is how Synthesize is looking. So to get through this obstacle, we're going to try to do enough points so we kind of balance the time versus money effect. The more time you put into this, obviously the better it'll be. But you have to realize that in a job, you don't have too much time per shot. So we're going to have to balance, like, okay, how quick can I do this shot while retaining that quality? So real quick, you're going to do points in the background for the background, obviously, and then points in the foreground to kind of get this motion going. Because without these foreground points, you're going to be kind of blind. So let me quickly get these guys, delete them. And this is how Synthesize is going to see things. It's kind of hard for it to, understand this motion without the foreground points. So, very essential for you to understand foreground, background, middle ground, and how we can balance that to make this motion. So, you're new to Synthesize, you're going to have many questions. You're going to have a billion things up here to see, a billion things to click here, but we're going to focus on the main things that work here. So trackers tab to make the trackers, solver to solve for the camera motion, and 3D to move, translate, rotate, scale, move the camera, all that 3D goodness in the 3D tab. Things I don't use ever, like in my whole career, I've never used things like lights or phases or rotomasking. So, you don't have to really use them. You can learn about them, but I'm going to try to help you focus on how to achieve tracks quickly, efficiently, and make them go down the pipeline for usage. So features pretty useful, but we're going to mainly focus on trackers, solver, and 3D for this. And there's a billion things up here to use, but the only thing I'm going to use is like duplicate mesh, and that's pretty much it. Everything else you can do outside of that. And I'm going to use drop onto mesh. That's pretty much everything I'm going to use up here for. So don't get overwhelmed. We're going to get through this, nicely. And yes, let's jump right into it. Let's go to the keyboard shortcuts. Let's try to navigate Synthesize and go to our first shot. So enjoy the tutorial. Thank you for watching.